Arpin, I can feel it, man. I can feel it. It's on Saturday night against the Florida Panthers. There was an electric atmosphere at the Bell Center. Fans were into it. But on Tuesday against the Ottawa Senators, I'm so looking forward to that game because it's going to be such an intense game. I can't hardly recall a regular season game that's been so significant for the Montreal Canadiens. I'm sure we have to go back a few years ago.
Well, funny you should mention that. I did kind of look back because yes, it is a consequential game, and the last one was more consequential. Okay, it was this Canadiens' second to last game of the season. It took place on April 4th, 2019. The Canadiens went to Washington. They were tied for the final wildcard spot with the Columbus Blue Jackets, who had a game in hand on them, and also had the tiebreak on them. Back then it was regulation and overtime wins, ROWs. Canadiens went to Washington. Lars Eller opened the scoring for the Caps. Shea Weber tied it up, and then Nick Dowd scored with just under 3 minutes into the second period to put the Capitals up 2-1. And from that point on, Braden Holtby shut the door. The Canadiens lost in regulation, did not collect a point. The Columbus Blue Jackets won their game in hand essentially the following day or 2 days later, and knocked the Canadiens out of the playoffs. The Canadiens needed that win to get in or to stay alive. Even that didn't even assure that they would be in. They needed that win to stay alive, and they didn't get it. Now, this is not nearly as consequential on Tuesday. Let's be honest, the Ottawa Senators have played themselves into a different category than the Canadiens right now. But still, if the Canadiens can win this game in regulation, they would close the gap with Ottawa to 4 points. But more importantly, further solidify their spot among the teams chasing that second wildcard spot. But yeah, it's going to be the added spice of being Ottawa, Montreal, two teams that don't particularly like each other.
No.
This is, to my eyes, the most consequential regular season game the Canadiens have played since that day in April of 2019. There will be others this season following that game, but this is a big one. And this is really, and the Canadiens deserve credit for putting themselves in a position where this game matters a lot to both teams, more so Montreal than Ottawa, but definitely to both teams, and should be fantastic theater. And frankly, it's going to be appointment viewing for Canadiens and Senators fans. And I can't wait for social media is going to be good on that night. I think there's going to be some good social mediaing going on between the two fan bases. It should be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on this Monday, March 17th. Very exciting game coming up. I mean, of course, Montreal Canadiens fans have learned to hate the Senators over the years, but personally, I can't help but being happy for what's going on in our nation's capital, because, it was about time that this franchise turned their luck and found some winning ways. I think that, the changes in ownership have been huge. Michael Endlauer has been bringing a very sane and positive vibe on this organization. The changes obviously made in the front office have been significant and and worthy of mention too. And on the ice, there are some guys that have been waiting for years to show what they're capable of doing in the playoffs. So, strictly as a hockey fan, and I've just taken Montreal out of the equation, I'm really curious to see what a guy like Brady Tkachuk can do in the playoffs. He's going to be
been
a
wondering
whole other
forever.
beast.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we got a taste of it at Four Nations, right? And so I think it'll be that times 4-7, right? I mean, you're facing this guy 4 games in a row, a minimum 7 games in a row.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, more likely or something closer to seven, and he's going to be a difference maker. I mean, just in terms of the physical toll he's going to take on defensemen, like we were mentioning last game, like Yuri Slavkovsky on the forecheck, here I come, kind of thing. Like Brady
Mhm.
Tkachuk, that's going to be Brady Tkachuk, game after game after game, which is what Josh Anderson was for the Canadians when they were in the playoffs against the Leafs in particular. But you add in Tkachuk's scoring touch, like Josh Anderson, that first round series against the Leafs, I remember him being so impactful, but I think he scored 1 goal in that series. Like he really didn't produce offensively. His impact came on the forecheck and just punishing the Leafs defensemen shift after shift, game after game, so that by the end of the series, whenever Anderson was on the ice, the Leafs defensemen just were getting rid of pucks as fast as they possibly could. Like they just wanted no part of him anymore.
Yeah.
Brady Tkachuk will have that plus, but then also have presumably the offensive impact that he normally does. So
So we're
it's going to
taking
be a great battle.
Yeah, so we're talking as if their spot in the playoffs is a foregone conclusion, which is not. I know that Money Puck right now gives them like very favorable odds to make the playoffs, something like 91% chances. But the Canadians have an opportunity, at least with a win, to close the gap and get closer to 4 points to the Senators if they win.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the type of hockey and the type of atmosphere we saw on Saturday shows how people have been starved for meaningful hockey. We've been talking a lot about players wanting to play meaningful games and the opportunity that they have to do so this season. But I think the same goes for the fans too, who have been, trying to. They've been looking for something to jump on and bite into, and this is the time of the year. So if there was great atmosphere on Saturday, you bring arch rivals like the Senators, it's going to be it'll be turned up to 11, I suspect. But there's still, just standing wise, there's still plenty at stake. And you could. I was looking at some numbers, and because the Canadians, they've found a certain level of consistency in their results, even going back to the beginning of December when Patrick Laine first started his season with the Canadians. If we start from December 3rd onwards, the Canadians have posted a 619 points percentage. They were 24, 14, and 4. That's 11 best in the NHL. So you could argue that the bad stretch that they had prior to the Four Nations face-off, it might have been the outlier more than the norm. Because, they had a stretch of wins that was untenable, and there's some sort of regression that was to be expected. But when you look at all those games, these 40-something games, this bad stretch in late January, early February, is probably it really sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of their performances, because for the most part since early December they've been a 619 team. But the Senators, if you take in the same sample, same amount of time, they were fifth best in the league, and their point percentage was at 655. So the level of consistency we've seen from Ottawa it has been pretty significant. So even though the Canadians have a chance by winning to get closer to the Sens, the cadence and the consistency in the production we've seen from Ottawa since early December suggests that it's unlikely that the Canadians can really bang on the Sens, losing ground and getting tired, and and spitting on or throwing all over themselves, like Marty used to say, like the way they did in so many seasons past. This year the Sens are different, so it's going to be a hard challenge if the Canadians want to get that first wildcard place. They're more likely going to battle for the second and last wild card spot in the East.
Well, I mean, the Sens had a similar stretch to the Canadians, right? They've had that. They won one game from February 3rd to about March 3rd. So they had a month. Obviously, Four Nations was in between there. So it was only a stretch of 7 or 8 games, and they only won one of them. That the thing is, right now they're on a total heater. They've won 6 in a row since that stretch ended. I mean, I guess the reason why I don't look at the Canadian stretch before Four Nations as an outlier per se. It does look like an outlier right now, but it also was a moment where they had put themselves in such a good position. They were in a playoff spot, and as soon as things got real, they crumbled, right? So it was telling in that sense. Things are now real again, but they've been real for a while. And coming out of Four Nations, it was very real. Their season was on the brink. Their GM was going to sell off all their parts that he could, was determined to do so, frankly, and they convinced him otherwise. And so that was a certain level of pressure that they rose up to and performed. And so that's an encouraging sign based on how we've talked about it. The two previous points in the season where pressure was highest, the beginning of the season and that stretch before Four Nations, they weren't able to rise up to it. So now I think for both Ottawa and Montreal, there's going to be a test to see how, because this is foreign territory for both teams and the majority of players on both teams. I mean, the Senators have some good veterans. David Perron has started to kind of ramp things up a little bit for them. Claude Giroux's on that team. They have guys who have gone through battles before and can settle a young team down, but they're still largely a young team who has not experienced not only the playoffs, but a genuine, legitimate playoff race. They like Montreal are usually out of it by this point in the season. So this is new territory for everyone involved. So it's the information gathering is really important, but it's really an opportunity for both these teams. For Ottawa, it's always been, for a long time, there was like a rivalry between Ottawa and Montreal, but it was really more of a rivalry to Ottawa than it was to Montreal, in the sense that Ottawa really hated Montreal and Montreal didn't really have that hate for Ottawa. It grew over time, but Ottawa has a big little brother syndrome, right? Like they have Toronto and Montreal, their fan base, their city is kind of divided between those two franchises. They had to win fans away from both those teams. But Toronto games and Montreal games in their building are always basically a 50-50 split. And I think Senators players despise the fact that the opposing team's fans walks into their building and cheers for the road team, which is it's not really the case at the Bell Center or at Scotiabank in Toronto. And so the dynamic's always been, sort of a little brother thing. So I think this is a bigger thing for Ottawa.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that. I agree with the big brother thing and the issue that they've got in their own building with the fans. There's no doubt about that. But I think that the rivalry, ever since the fat bug-eyed walrus,
that series for sure.
That series in 2013. From that point on, I think that the rivalry only grew with the Sens, in part because as the Canadians got less and less relevant and they saw the Boston Bruins remaining a very, very good hockey team, it was hard to maintain a rivalry when it's so lopsided. And it's been for many years between Boston and Montreal. All the main actors in that rivalry between Montreal and Boston at some point vanished. Lucic, Subban, Dale Weiss, et cetera. Only Brad Marchand was remaining until
Gregory Campbell.
Gregory Campbell left too. So, and it was slowly but surely replaced by the Sens because there were teams of similar strength, and you could look at the level of animosity on the ice. It's always been games full of cheap shots. It made for dirtier games and more intense games than honestly what we saw against Boston for the past 6-7 years. So but I think that there's an opportunity for that rivalry to go up a notch with the game tomorrow night, and they've got still another one later on, also towards the end of the regular season.